Yeah, a little bit both.
I'm just, you're,
All right. Good evening, everyone. We are so excited to have those of you who come in person as well as those who are online. We're very excited this evening to have Dr. DJ. I mean, he's amazing. Dr. Graham is amazing. He is an alum of the district, and so we feel like he's come home. And that makes us happy. So he has a presentation tonight that I think hits home for a lot of us. Whether you're a perfectionist yourself, whether you are the parent of a perfectionist, it's tough. It's not an easy world to navigate. And Dr. Graham has some amazing things that he's going to share with us this evening. So we are very excited to have him. And I'm going to turn it over to you because they really got this. Thank you very much.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Whoa, that is a lot of DJ. So, oh,
he's gonna just take it down just a little. You're good. You're,
so hello, everyone. My name is Dr. DJ Graham. I am head of school at Gary K. Kroger Young Scholars Academy and author of a teacher's guide to supporting gifted middle school students. But like Karen said, I am a PV schools alum. I started in elementary school in kindergarten back when PV used to do half-day kindergarten and worked my way up through the district. So I was at Echo Mountain when it was one school, then Vista Verde Middle School, and then North Canyon where I did the IB program. And I was identified gifted in second grade. So this presentation is going to be sharing a lot of my perspectives being a gifted perfectionist. So we're going to be kind of covering four main kind of things. First is looking at my background as a former perfectionist. Then we're going to talk about gifted perfectionism. Then we're going to talk about strategies for supporting your gifted perfectionists. One of the things that I really want to emphasize and support with is giving strategies that you can utilize to help your gifted students. One of the other things with this presentation is that there are elements in here that might feel more teacher focused, some might feel more parent focused. Part of it is I want you to understand the messages that were shared with teachers so that you can enter those collaborative discussions as well, because supporting our gifted students is not a one-person job. It's a collaboration. And then the final thing on here is I have questions listed as a separate section, but I will say if you have questions, if you have thoughts, anything like that, please don't hesitate to jump in, raise your hand. I want to make sure that you feel supported in this. I'm not somebody that you're going to throw me off if you ask a question with it. I would rather answer it and address it because it might be something relevant to everybody. But let's go ahead and get started with a former perfectionist. And this is me when I was in second grade. I am very adorable, I know. So the reason I have this image here is because like so many students, I was identified gifted in second grade. But I think more importantly for this presentation, second grade is where I have my first distinct memory of experiencing perfectionism. And it was in Mrs. Geis's second grade class, and I was sitting there, and I looked at the clock, as I was known to do, and I realized we are supposed to be at specials right now. So I raised my hand and I said, Miss Geis, we are supposed to be at specials right now. And she said, oh my gosh, you are right. Thank you so much. We would have missed it had you not said something. My goodness. Did she just open up a floodgate of me being the timekeeper in class? From there on, I sat there and I kept track of when we were supposed to be in what subject, when we should have changed subject, when we were supposed to be washing our hands for lunch, all of that. I became a little terror in the most responsible way possible. But I can remember the anxiousness I would feel being a second grader if we were not sticking to that schedule. And I was the type of kid that I would put myself to bed. Like I knew what my bedtime was and I would go, okay, I'm going to bed. That's what we do at this age. And it doesn't make sense like being a parent now, like it's a constant fight of like, no, it's bedtime. But for me, that routine was really important. And I would get anxious if we diverged from it. And it got to a point where my timekeeping started causing problems, where Miss Geis called my mom and had to tell her, DJ is doing great, but he is constantly checking in on me. And if we diverge from our schedule, it's causing stress and anxiety in the class. So this is going to be referencing my experience a lot, but that is my first memory. So 6, 7 years old, like not my first memory, but my first memory with perfectionism, 6, 7 years old, I'm experiencing these feelings. So we're going to go ahead and watch real quick a TED Talk, and we're going to let the whole thing play. And this is from a gifted student, and she's going to share a spoken word poem about her experience being a perfectionist. And while we watch this, I want you to be thinking about what stands out to you from her presentation.
My sound was working, but that doesn't help you. I was trying to get my sound off. My sound is working. You want me to go backwards and do mine? Okay. Okay, hold on. Because I just turned my sound off. Can you go back to the beginning?
I am a recovering perfectionist.
Just slightly sounded.
And as a recovering perfectionist, I can tell you from experience that the side of perfectionism that everyone seems to see is the good side. You know, being a high achiever, academic accolades, seemingly having your life together. But what no one really sees is the fear. The fear of disappointing everyone, the fear of being exposed that one day everyone is going to wake up and see how flawed you really are. The fear that you are a waste of space because you are not and will never be perfect. One day a year ago, I decided to stop pretending that everything was okay. You see, every year at my high school, the seniors write a speech to present in English class, and students usually write about something they've learned through their high school experience or a message that they'd like to leave behind to their younger peers. I decided to share my struggle with perfectionism through a spoken word poem. Today, whenever I perform this poem, I'm taken back to the person I was a year ago, and I'm reminded of how stuck and unhappy I felt, but also the progress I've made since then. And so today, I'm so excited to share with you that poem, An Open Letter to Perfectionism. Dear Perfectionism, you're an old friend of mine. You've been by my side for as long as I can remember. In fact, I don't know what my life would be like without you. Remember in the 4th grade when I'd get less than 100 on a spelling test and you'd tell me it was a testament to my inability to amount to anything? Remember in the 6th grade when I'd turn in an assignment late and of course you would be there to berate me for being so undisciplined and uninspired? Remember how throughout high school you'd sit next to me at award ceremonies, at competitions that I actually enjoyed doing, until you began whispering, second place. Might as well have gotten last. First place good, second place bad. Remember when you sat me down one day and said, obviously you're too stupid to get it, so let me spell it out for you. P for the people you need to please and the potential you lack. E for the effort you must give, commit to the path. R for the relentless pursuit of the goal. Get with the program. F and E for flawlessness and excellence, not fun and excitement, because who needs that when you could be perfect? C for constantly criticizing yourself, your flaws must be exposed. T for all the time you must devote. Did you get it now? Do you understand? Shut up. Don't say you can't do it, you must, because this is what it takes to be good enough. Dear perfectionism, most people have an angel perched on one shoulder, a devil sitting on the other, but I have you. A big brother watching me, driving me insane. You've built a room 101 inside of my brain, and I'm strapped to the chair. On my wrist is a chain, and you've got a cage full of every mistake I've ever made, and there's no escape. Because you've got an evolutionary advantage. These opposable thumbs ain't got nothing on your talons, and yours are virtually irretractable. You're an animal. But you're also ice and fire. The situation's turning dire because you're melting my confidence, leaving me frozen in inaction, burning up my dreams and extinguishing my passion. It's like I have a mental autoimmune disease. Someone help me, please, because my mind is attacking its own thoughts, making it hard to breathe, making me fall to my knees, saying, perfectionism, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I'm average. I'm sorry that I let you down just like I let everybody else in my life down. And I'm sorry that it will never be enough, that I will never be enough, that I will never be perfect. Dear perfectionism, throughout my life, I've read book after book about utopias and dystopias, how attempting to build the perfect world only ever leads to a devastated one. And so I'm looking in the mirror, hearing you whisper in my ear, realizing your instruction is only driving me to destruction. I'm realizing that a utopia is just a metaphor for everything I've been fighting for, and dystopia is the reality of what my life will turn out to be if I'm constantly trying to be perfect. And so it's finally time. It's time to say goodbye to these bad habits gone awry, because I've learned over the years that perfection isn't worth the tears and that I'll never get there anyway. Dear perfectionism, I had an epiphany that the one who's been letting you control me is me, because I'm the one who put these chains on my brain. I'm the one who keeps myself in pain. But just as I'm the one who can choose to remain the same, I have the power to choose to walk away. And so this is my rejection, my defection from your grasp, because I'm done with this infection. It's all misdirection. I'm overthrowing your reign over my mind, along with my obsessive fear of failure. This is what the French call a coup d'etat, a rebellion of an internal nature. And so no longer do you control me, because once I let you go, I'll be free to make mistakes, to finally be me, to come in second place without wanting to scream, to be okay with who I am, and to finally show the world that it's okay for me to be imperfect. Dear perfectionism, I've just finished my first year of university, and there's been some major change, because my freshman 15 wasn't 15 pounds, but the 15 years I lost to self-doubt, because perfectionism, you're just an old friend. And it's time for me to transcend dear perfectionism. This is the end. Thank you.
What stands out to you about her poem? It's, even if you're not a gifted perfectionist, there are so many things in there that I think a lot of us can relate to. Anything else stand out about?
I like to remind chains on my brain.
What about that line stood out to you?
Just that those thoughts that people have bogged me down. All the squelch creatism, creative, being creative.
Yes.
All of that.
100%. I love this poem, and I know it's a lengthy video, but I think playing it out in its entirety is really helpful. Hearing from somebody their experience. There's one thing that I disagree with it, though, at least in my experience. Those feelings don't go away. I was a gifted perfectionist. I was identified in second grade. I went through elementary, middle, high school, all in advanced programs. I did college and all of that. But those feelings of perfectionism are there. I literally work with gifted students who I work with on perfectionism, and they are still there.
Someone online said traits that help us in some areas can inevitably hinder us.
100%. We're gonna talk about that, and there's a term, and I don't love it in terms of like people categorizing perfectionism, but it does create that feeling where it seems like it's a good thing until it's not. I think a really good example of this is that with this presentation, last year, Karen and Elizabeth reached out and said, DJ, we would like for you to work with the district and do a PD for parents and teachers. And I said, awesome, what would you like me to talk about? And they said, perfectionism. And I said, perfect, I can do that. And they said, awesome, send us a title. And I started panicking because I did not have a title for this presentation. I knew what I was going to talk about. I already knew clips that I was going to include from pop culture and things like that, but I had no idea what the title was. And I've done a lot of presentations, and I usually have like cool, catchy titles, like everything I learned about teaching gifted middle schoolers, I learned from the Justice League. I'm like, that's awesome, people want to go to that. For this presentation, I did not know. So I did what any good gifted kid does. I just didn't respond to her email. I just ignored it. And then Karen said follow-up, like a week or two later, saying, hey, DJ, we just need the presentation title for the brochure. Like, I don't need the presentation, nothing. I ignored it. It took Karen 4 or 5 emails before I finally sent a presentation, because the thought of having a title that was not catchy, snappy, that would draw people in was paralyzing. So I come to you saying the title of this presentation is a lie. I am not a former perfectionist, I am a coping perfectionist. So as we go through this presentation, my hope is that I can provide you with strategies for how to support your gifted students or yourself for working through perfectionism and understanding that this is something that is an ongoing process. And I share that because I think it's really important that we understand that even if we're dealing with secondary students, or you work with a student and you get over a big bout of perfectionism in the elementary age, these are still discussions and thoughts that students are going to have. And it can be challenging because for our gifted students, they might think, oh, I was a perfectionist in elementary school, I should be done with that. And then once those feelings creep in, they feel like a failure. So I share that, not to be like, this is a doomsday sentence, but to explain that this is something that our gifted students need support with. So when we're talking about gifted perfectionism, I think it's really important that we understand characteristics of gifted ed. So when we're looking, this is the updated definition of gifted from the National Association for Gifted Children. So gifted ed is unique in the field of education because every state basically has its own definition. There's a lot of overlap, but you go in Arizona to another state, there's going to be differences in the ways in which they identify and categorize gifted. The National Association kind of becomes a beacon for us to understand. So they identify that students with gifts and talents perform or have the capability to perform at higher levels compared to others of the same age, experience, and environments in one or more domains, and they require modifications to their educational experience to learn and realize their potential. So this is pretty standard, but some of the key things to understand is that we're talking about this idea of ability that they are performing or have the ability to perform at higher levels, and they're being compared to same age, experience, and environment. In addition to that, they can come from all racial, ethnic, cultural populations. They require sufficient and appropriate learning opportunities to realize their potential. They can have learning and processing disorders. And then we're going to skip the third or the fourth bullet down, require varied services based on their changing needs. And then that fourth bullet is the reason I'm here today. They need support and guidance to develop socially and emotionally. And that's what we're here for today. Because gifted students, it's not just the academic piece. It's a really core piece. But that social emotional development, understanding those needs, all factor into who our gifted students are. In addition, when we're looking at characteristics, acceleration, gifted students learn at an accelerated rate, and they are naturally curious. These things are wonderful things that can make our gifted students who they are. Overexcitabilities, this is a term that describes the ways in which gifted students tend to experience the world. And these 5 different abilities here, psychomotor, sensual, intellectual, imaginational, and emotional, these are essentially describing heightened senses in the ways in which they feel or can experience. And gifted students can hit all 5 of these. Psychomotor is like movement, that need to get out that energy. The sensual is the sensation of touch. Intellectual is the ways in which students think. Imaginational is that is creation and living in your own world. And the emotional is the ways in which we feel. All of these come together to represent gifted students, and they might experience intensities in regard to one or more of these. When we're looking at characteristics, this comes from Barbara Clark's Growing Up Gifted. It's one of like the iconic works in gifted ed that talks about characteristics of gifted learners. And she breaks it down into 4 different kind of categories: the cognitive characteristics, the creative, the affective, and the behavioral. And looking at this list, you're probably going to look and you'll either see a lot of these, if not all of them, in your gifted child. And what I want us to do is I want us to take a second to identify some of these. And how are these characteristics gifts and strengths? And how are they weaknesses? So I'll give you a second to look through. I know it's a little far away. Out as strengths and stand out as weaknesses, or we might see them as both a strength and a weakness.
Say overall that they could be seen as weaknesses because from a child's point of view, they might not be emotionally or socially or emotionally capable of handling maybe what their mind is. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's a huge one. We're going to talk about that in just a second, actually. But that is one of those things that when we talk about gifted, the title itself, gifted, carries a weight to it. It makes it seem like it's all great, but anyone that has grown up gifted, raised a gifted child, taught gifted students knows that there are amazing things that makes this population incredible. But there are challenges that can be really hard to work with.
I see the power of critical thinking, and that's so important. So I think that there are ways you can begin vertically, and then you turn that inwards. And the other thing that I see is the emotional sensitivity or empathy to other people's feelings that sometimes get on the feelings of others, and it almost debilitates us if our friends are going through something challenging.
Oh, yeah. Well, especially when we talk about problems facing the world, that worldliness can be so overwhelming. I had a student, and this student, they were brilliant. They were 13 or 14 in 9th grade, and just really, really bright in terms of science. And this student did all sorts of reading in terms of global warming. And they like were separated on it, did a deep dive in it. And they read all the research, and their conclusion was, it's hopeless. There's nothing that we can do. So why even try? And the student was 14. And that feels like it should be this like time to go out and change the world. Let's change it. But the student processing all of this information went, there's nothing we can do. I read the scientists. They said it's all doom and gloom. And we're like, no, you can do it. Like, let's figure it out. And they were like, no. Because they were processing it as a child, but they're reading these college level papers that assume that you have a certain level of background and context. And that leads to this idea of asynchronous development, which describes the out of sync and jagged development gifted students have. So this, I think, characterizes it pretty well, where it says an extraordinarily gifted 6-year-old with an IQ of 170 has a 10-year-old mind. At 9, that child would have a 15-year-old mind. And at 12, they would have a 20-year-old mind. This puts it in pretty simple terms to help characterize it, but what it's saying is that that child is thinking at a very advanced level for their age. The problem with that is that advanced thinking is not uniform across the board. Meaning in a lot of times, asynchronous development means that you have children that are thinking well above their level, but processing it at the same level as their age peers. So that 6-year-old student that is thinking as a 9-year-old or as a 10-year-old, they might be reading all sorts of like amazing things, and they're reading content that is really profound, and you're like, that's amazing, but they are processing it like a 6-year-old. Like, that is crazy. And think about it as we get older. At 12 years old, adolescents, they are setting into their teenage years, middle school. It is a hard time. If you're reading college level texts, but you're processing it like a middle schooler, oh man, that is really hard. This comic, I think, does a really great job of illustrating asynchronous development. Calvin says, I'm a genius, but a misunderstood genius. And Hobbes says, what's misunderstood about you? And he says, nobody thinks I'm a genius. Well, he has put his shirt on the wrong way. One of the other things that we need to think about when we're talking about asynchronous development is that what appears to be bad judgment or selfishness in preteens or young teens may really be a failure of their young brains to interpret, prioritize, and predict, simply because that part of the prefrontal lobe has not completely matured. So when our minds develop, the prefrontal lobe that's basically controlling all the things that we expect students to be good at in school develops less. And so we have gifted students that are brilliant, and we accelerate them and move them forward, and we expect them to be working at a certain level, but their brains have not developed those skills yet. And so it can be really hard. And when we talk about gifted perfectionism, their bodies have not developed at a rate to be able to match some of the other things that they're thinking of and be able to do. In addition to that, asynchronous development is not balanced across subjects, meaning you can have a 7-year-old that is highly gifted in reading at an 8th grade level, but their math abilities are at a 6th grade level, and their fine motor skills are at a 2nd grade level. So I want you to think about this student, okay? They are reading 8th grade level texts. Okay, so they're reading, if like we think about the PD lit list, they're reading Fahrenheit 451 in 2nd grade, which is amazing. But their fine motor skills are that of a 2nd grader. So they're thinking at this advanced level, they're pondering Ray Bradbury's dystopia, where he's looking and saying how we consume media is really significant. And they're having these amazing discussions. But when they cut out crafts, they're not cutting on the line. It's not perfect. And now they are having a reason, why can I do that, but I can't do that? And now they're having to see this whole thing about themselves as not perfect. And they're having to wonder, why am I dumb? Why am I not that smart? I have students at my school who are amazing, and they are already taking ASU, like Math 300 at ASU, but they're in 8th grade and struggling in their reading class. And I've had discussions with those kids where they say, why am I so dumb? I don't get it. My other friends, they're doing it and I can't. And I'm like, you do realize you're in a college level class right now. But they don't see that. They see the fact that they got out first round in the spelling bee. They see that they got a B on a test. So when we're talking about perfectionism, it's not balanced across all subjects, and that can have an impact. And when we're talking about perfectionism, this is a stat from the National Association for Gifted Children. 20% of gifted students experience perfectionism in a way that creates problems. So first, one of the things that I think is really funny about this is it says 20%. 1 in 5 gifted students says that they experience perfectionism in a way that causes problems. I don't know how this study was conducted, but if students are self-reporting, I know I would not be the one to admit that my perfectionism is causing problems. Like, think about that. You're going to kids and saying, do you have perfectionism that is causing problems? And they're like, yeah, it is enough for me. an adult with a doctorate to sit up here and say, my perfectionism makes me anxious and I don't want to make a presentation. So again, I don't know this study. This is one of those stats that comes from the NAGC. But I would not be surprised if it's higher. The other thing about this is this line, perfectionism in a way that creates problems. There's a term in a lot of the perfectionism research that is maladaptive perfectionism, which is basically identifying perfectionism that causes problems, is essentially what that boils down to. And I've read research that's like, there's good perfectionism, like trying your best and wanting things to be good. And there's bad perfectionism that means that you spend all your time on assignments. But what concerns me about this is it categorizes it as like, oh, it's okay to be a perfectionist until it's not. Because I'll tell you, I've worked with secondary students my entire career, middle and high school. And I've seen the students that the first time they get a B is in a 7th grade class. And I will tell you, it's not pretty. When I would start my year, I used to teach the DLC here in Paradise Valley. It's now the Quest or the Quest program. And in that program, when I was teaching it, we would start with Fahrenheit 451. And I would start with that novel because it was challenging. It built off of themes that we were going to be talking about. And I wanted the students to fully understand like the level that we were going to be working at. And so we would read it and it was a challenge, but the kids worked through it. And so I remember one year I gave the assessment at the end of it and the entire class struggled on it. So I did the teacher thing. I let them retake saying, or make test corrections. Because I'm like, that's on me. But I had a student that even though he did these test corrections, he still got a B. When I handed back the papers, this student did not just cry, he howled. I'm talking like a wolf howl. He threw his hands up, howled, and slammed his head down on the desk because that was the first B he had ever gotten. And I talked to the student and tried to work through it with him. I'm like, dude, I made the grade, like, I know the grade book. Like, this is a small assignment, like, small in the grand scheme of things. But that wasn't enough. It was bad enough that he had failed it the first time, but even with the corrections, he didn't get the A. And so this terminology, I do have concerns about. Because I've seen a lot of students, and we don't want the first time they experience quote unquote failure to be in middle school, college. When we're talking about definitions, I think it's really valuable to understand. The dictionary identifies it as a disposition to regard anything short of perfection as unacceptable. So when we're talking about that idea, I think the most important term is this idea of unacceptable. It's not just you want to be perfect, it is that is not okay if you're not perfect. And then Delisle and Galbraith, they have a text for gifted, about gifted, growing up, or not growing up, gifted, when gifted kids don't have all the answers. It's really fantastic. If you've not read it, it's really well worth it to look at the social emotional needs of gifted learners. But they identify that perfectionism means that you can never fail, you always need approval, and if you come in second, you're a loser. Now, I wanted to include a clip from Talladega Nights, the Will Ferrell movie, where he says, if you're not first, you're last. But I wanted PV to invite me back to speak, though I held up on that reference. But I think what's really important is this idea that second place is not good enough. Anything less than first is perceived as a failure. And that is such a scary place to be in, because you're not always going to be number one. Especially as the pond gets bigger, it's going to be a lot harder. Some concerns, and I use the term maladaptive perfectionism just because I wanted to make sure I'm going along with what research is saying. But you might recognize some of these from your gifted students or yourself. Spending excessive time on tasks. This is where your student is sitting there and they are going to take the homework assignment that is read the chapter and answer the 5 questions at the end of the chapter. And they're going to spend 2 hours doing it because they need to make sure that they get it exactly right. Anger or frustration over anything less than the desired goal. Not submitting completed work. This one is so confusing for everyone involved. But I had a student, brilliant student. They went through, like in my class, participating, they were in every discussion that we did. And like, I had no qualms or concerns about their performance in the class. And then when I was reviewing my grade book, I looked and I'm like, how does this student have a 20% in my class? Like, they were missing everything. So I held a meeting with the parents and the student, and we were talking, trying to figure out what was going on. And the student was like, oh, I've done every assignment throughout this entire semester. They were all in the student's Google Drive. But to the student, they were afraid of the feedback they would get on it. To them, failing on their own terms was better than having me criticize their work. Now, we worked through that and the student submitted the work. I didn't penalize for late and we got to a good space. But I mean, think about that. I would rather fail the class than be told it's anything less than perfect. And then procrastination or refusing to begin. This is we just need the title. I don't know the title, so I'm not going to respond. The pursuit of excellence means taking risks, trying new things, growing, changing, and sometimes failing. The struggle is the point. That's how we grow. I would explain it to my students that when you go and lift weights, if you're trying to develop muscle, you don't go and lift the 2-pound weights. You go and lift slightly outside of what you're comfortable with, or you do reps to break down the muscles so that they have time to heal and grow. And for most of my students, they're like, I have no idea what you're talking about. Like, I don't lift weights, but it made sense to me. But that struggle is the point. We get better by experiencing that failure and working through it and understanding how it goes. There's a fantasy author, Brandon Sanderson. He's like the most prolific, famous, like independent published author, like ever. He's written a bunch of different things that I was listening to a lecture that he was giving about writing and said, realistically, you want to have like 7 to 10 novels written before you get published with your first. And he was saying that the reason for that is that when they ask for your second, you need to understand your writing process for when things get hard, how you work through that. That if your first novel gets picked up, you haven't worked through that. You haven't spent the days of, I don't know what to write. I don't feel like writing. Because when there's a deadline, that's a scary thing. And so you need to work through it. And that's part of what we want our gifted students to develop. So when we're talking about where do these feelings come from, some of them are intrinsic, right? We just have this perception of who we are and how we need to be. But some of them are gleaned from observation. Gifted students are incredibly observant. They are looking at everything going on around them, and they are paying attention to it. Down to little things, like, oh, you changed the way you said something, you must be upset. Like those sort of like finite things, and you're like, no, it's just like 6 in the morning. Like I'm like waking up still. But sometimes we contribute to the feelings of perfectionism. So if you've ever seen me present or know anything, like a lot of my presentations lean on pop culture. It's very core to who I am. Like in my office, I have not hung any of my diplomas up, but I've set up all of my One Piece and Batman figures on my shelf because like that's the important stuff. But as I've become a father and all of that, I've realized that my pop culture references have started to skew younger because that's predominantly what we have. But we're gonna watch a clip here, start with a clip from the children's show Bluey. And if you're unfamiliar with Bluey, it deals with the world of anthropomorphic dogs and focuses on Bluey, her sister Bingo, and their mom and dad and their friends. A lot of it is centered around the play that they experience, and there's creativity. It's a really wonderful show. But one of the things Bluey does so well is that it tackles big topics in a way that is accessible for children, so they're having meaningful discussions. But as an adult, you watch and it resonates and connects. The number of times I've openly wept watching Bluey is kind of astounding. The clip we're going to watch comes from an episode called Perfect. And it focuses with Bluey and her sister Bingo making a card for their dad for Father's Day. And in this episode, Bluey is struggling to make her card because it's not perfect. So we'll go ahead and watch the clip and then talk through what we see. So in that moment, Mom is not intending to traumatize her daughter. But what she has told Bluey is that perfect makes it on the fridge and is more valuable than the other drawings on there. And even if we don't overtly use those terms, there are things that we do that can subtly send that message. So what we're going to talk about are some strategies for how we can work with our students to support them in addressing perfectionism and look at the ways that we address things with them. So the resources in here, so with most presentations, there's a lot of citations that happen within the works. I didn't want it to become a bunch of gobbledygook on there, so here are all the resources I've used. There's books, there's blog posts. I encourage you to take a picture of the slide. I've heard the author of the first book is really good. So there are 3 strategies that we are going to talk about: feedback, expectations and goal settling, and modeling. When we talk about feedback, that feels like it's more of a teacher-centered thing, but there are things that we do in the feedback that we give our gifted students on a daily basis. Because it's one of the most clear ways that we can communicate and support our gifted students and help them work through perfectionism. Because even if you're not the teacher grading the assignment, we still have those discussions with them. When we give feedback, we want it to be specific, mindful, and process focused. So when we talk about specific, our feedback should be specific to the task, our expectations, and include examples and evidence for support. So as a teacher, this would be avoiding saying a thing like, "Great job, you did it. Kudos." I don't know if many teachers are right kudos, but yeah. We want to avoid things like that because it's not giving them any guidance on what happened. We want to talk through and give them the feedback about what they did well and how they did well, so that they understand those individual parts of what they did and how it relates to that. But in the same breath, I also make a point to talk about areas of growth. When I'm a teacher, and I'm an English teacher by trade, and that's one of those things that anytime I do a paper and grade papers for my students, even if they get 100% on the paper, I still talk about areas for them to grow and improve. Because I want to disassociate grades from what they did well. Now, we want to be careful as parents, the ways in which we're giving feedback and those sort of things. We don't want to be like, let's talk about what you did well, let's talk about the areas for improvement. But it can be simple. If your child draws a picture and you're looking at it, you compliment those things that they did well. I love how you included the scales on the snake. Oh, but where is the snake? Or is there a background? Those sort of things can spark those discussions and help them see oh, what I thought might have been perfect needs more, but it doesn't devalue what's there. And we're working on this collaborative process. The other thing is we want to be mindful. We need to time our feedback so that it can be heard by our gifted students. If they are in a particular vulnerable space or frustrated, regardless of what we say, it will not be helpful, right? I'm sure many of us have seen the tantrum, the frustration, the screaming, throwing things, all of that. That's probably not the time to say, you forgot a period at the end of that sentence. You capitalize your name or whatever it is. We need to make sure that they're in a space to hear the feedback. One thing that I've done with my students, with my staff, is we use the traffic light question before we enter into spaces where feedback is going to be shared. And that is just opening up with, where are you today? Green, yellow, red. Green is, I am open to feedback. Yellow is, I want to hear what you think, but I'm feeling a bit more. Red is, not today. So when we're working with students, this becomes incredibly powerful because you're giving them power in the situation. And we use this just as a check-in. And we, when I would do this, I would just at the start of class, if we're doing peer reviews or anything, I would just say, let's do a check. Green, yellow, red. Most students would be green, a couple would be yellow, and then sometimes have a student that would be red. And I would let students know you can move in and out of these spaces. If we go through the class and you feel, it's a safe space, yellow, awesome. If you started yellow and you're like, oh no, you can move to red. But that slight thing of giving that control can be really powerful in opening up students' feedback. And it can just be, hey, do you want to hear what's good? Would you like to hear areas for improvement? It all depends on the age of your child and all of that. But asking them about how they're feeling can be really empowering and remove some of the stigma from that. I've had teachers that ask, with red light, like, what if you have a student that's always red light and they're never open to feedback? Discussion, so I will tell you from experience, I've never had a student that is just permanently in the red zone. Start there. But once they realize it's a safe space, they tend to move to yellow. If they did stick there, I've talked to them about, hey, what are you worried about? You know, this is part of what we're doing. What is your concern? Sometimes it's, I don't want to be told that my ideas are bad. Sometimes it's, well, what type of feedback are you open to? So that they can start seeing those things as not scary, but as part of what they're doing. And this can just be that simple check of, hey, are you okay? Are you open to talk right now? And then the last one in regarding feedback is process focus. It should offer, a lot of our feedback tends to be focused on the end result, right? You won the game. You got an A on that test. But that doesn't acknowledge all of the work that happened before that, right? We put the end result as the final like marker of success, but it completely ignores the fact that there might have been struggle getting to that point. The way that we frame feedback can be really important because removing that stigma of this end result is the only thing that matters can shift our perspective. So when we're talking about this, we're going to reference Blue's Clues. I told you my references got really young, but this is from the updated Blue's Clues and You. So in, I believe it was 2019, they rebooted Blue's Clues or like continued on, like spun off or whatever. But this is our new host, Josh, and they made some modifications to the show. One of them was in regard to the goodbye song. So we're going to go ahead and watch the original goodbye song.
Now it's time for so long. But we'll sing just one more song. Thanks for doing your part. If you're our smart, you know with me and you and my dog Blue, we can do anything that we wanna do. Bye. See you later.
In the updated Blue's Clues, they changed it slightly.
Give me a second.
Oh.
Okay.
Ready? They made a slight change of adding the line, "You sure are smart and worked really hard." That is such a huge shift in that song. Because the original lyrics, I love. Like every kid should be told that they're smart. And being a father, being an educator, like it saddens me that for some kids, that's the first time or the only time they're gonna hear that they're smart. So I'm all for that. I don't want to remove that. But Blue's Clues is a puzzle show. And kids are having to piece together clues. And you find 3 Blue's Clues and you figure out what the end message is and all of that. But what if you're a kid that the clues are duck, duck, goose, and you didn't realize that it was duck, duck, goose? Or you struggle to find the clues while the game was going on. And you don't feel very smart. That's a really hard space to be. The shift of you sure are smart and worked very hard removes the end result as the only thing that matters. It's celebrating the process of getting there. For our gifted students, so often, especially as they get older, they start taking on more on their own. And it's very natural. Identity development, like adolescence, 12 to like 18, is when students are establishing their identity and they're starting to establish their identity removed from their parents. Who am I outside of the norms established here? And that's where you get like adolescent pushback and that sort of thing. And it's very natural and very common and part of development. But it can be really isolating when you're sitting there working. And the end result is the great thing that we look at. Maybe it took you a really long time to find those resources. Maybe you spent hours crafting that opening paragraph. We want to make sure that we celebrate all of those achievements going through. And it can be really simple. If your child plays a sport, acknowledge the practice that they did. Even if they won the game, they scored the game-winning goal, whatever it might be, tie in the work that they did to build there. Man, I've seen you practicing your free throws. Like, you really came through, like it's really paid off. That little bit can help them realize they don't have to get it first try. That makes a big difference because it's acknowledging and supporting the process of getting there, as opposed to simply just saying you won or you lost. When we talk about expectations and goal setting, one of the things that I like to discuss is this idea of progress-focused goals, and not just the end goal, right? Because we have lofty goals. Our gifted students have lofty goals, and that can be really challenging, right? So what I mean by long-term versus progress-focused, a long-term goal would be, I want to be a grandmaster ranked chess player, which is a super awesome goal. But if your goal is, I'm gonna be a grandmaster, and you lose your 3rd grade chess tournament, I'm a failure. Magnus Carlsen doesn't lose. We need to look at all the steps it takes to get to that end goal. So a progress-focused goal would be, during my next chess match, I will focus on not straining my pawns. Chess.com does this actually really well because they will analyze your match. So after you play your chess match, it will tell you, you made a textbook move. You made a great move. You blundered. In my case, it goes, you blundered, you blundered, you blundered. And what they'll do after that is they'll then give you a couple of video lessons about things that it's picking up on in your chess play. So this is one that came from a chess match I played. I don't have lofty goals of being a grandmaster ranked chess player, but I was playing a chess match, I lost, and it said, hey, why don't you work on not isolating your pawn? And I went, oh, I did not know that was something I needed to do. When we work with our gifted students, setting context for their goals and not squashing them, but saying, what does it take to get to that goal? So we can empower them on not feeling like if they don't reach that goal, they're a failure. Many of our gifted students have goals of going to Harvard, right? They want to be Rory Gilmore. That's all they've had like in their minds. But it can feel defeating if your goal is Harvard and you got a B on your 3rd grade science project. The progress can be, well, let's talk about getting to Harvard. Like, that's great. How do we get to Harvard? What does the application process look like? Okay, so they want to see you do advanced work in high school. Well, we're not in high school. What else could you do? Oh, they want to see you volunteer and impact your community. We can do that. So you can start building in progress for students early so that they realize there are a lot of parts to get there. And it takes this from this lofty goal, but this is the focus. And they might get frustrated at that lower level, but what it does is it now empowers them to, this is the thing that I can accomplish. This is the goal I can achieve. These two work in tandem with one another. And they can be a determining factor of determining what next steps are. The feedback we give can impact the ways in which we set goals with our gifted students. So when we're talking about those things and we're saying, you worked really hard and shot lots of free throws, you might have your gifted student that says, yeah, but I had 6 turnovers. Okay, well, that happens. How do we practice that? Like, what could we do? You can start putting it into these progress-focused goals and start empowering in those things. So even with incremental and progress-focused goals, it can be an overwhelming factor for the gifted perfectionist. It's really hard to think about all of these things. And our gifted students can really perseverate on things and spend an excessive amount of time on tasks. So what I've worked with my students and parents on are 2 different things. One is considering task value. So I would talk with parents that would come to me and say, my kid is spending endless amounts of time on all of these assignments. They're up until 2 AM. Why are you assigning so much homework? And I'm like, I'm not. Like, I didn't assign homework. And they're like, they were working. And it was like the bell ringer from that day. And I'm like, that was meant to be spent like 5 minutes on. So what I would talk with parents about is having discussions with your children about the time they spend and consider the value of the tasks. And I don't want that to make it sound like I'm saying, oh, certain things are more important than others, and I realize that there's value in everything that a teacher does. But there's difference between the 100-point essay and the 5-point bell ringer that they expect you to spend 5 minutes. Having those discussions can help them realize it's okay. Working with the teacher to say, hey, can you have this discussion with them? You're the owner of the grade. The other thing is setting time limits, and this is one that needs to be in tandem with teachers. But I would have students that would spend a lot of time on assignments. And so what I started doing when parents would come to me and say, I don't know what to do. My kid is spending all of this time on these assignments. I would tell them and the student, and sometimes it was me sending an email. Sometimes I would literally post in the assignment description how long I wanted them to spend on it and no more. So I would tell them 25 minutes. If it's over 25 minutes, you have my permission to stop. And we'll follow up on where you got with that. Now, I told the teachers, we want to make sure we don't penalize kids for that and say, oh, well, you spent 25 minutes and now I'm giving you 25% of the grade because you didn't finish it. We want to work with teachers, but that's one of those things that even just asking the teacher, how long should they be spending on this can be a really good frame of reference. It really is important though that there's communication between home and school and that teachers understand where you're coming from and setting that framework. One of the things that we really need to understand as well is that the way we communicate expectations plays a critical role in helping our students feel comfortable making mistakes. I've heard this saying a lot as an educator of gifted students. I don't care how my child does in school as long as they do their best. And I've had the parents feel like, I don't care if they get C's or D's, if that's their best, that's their best. I love that sentiment. The problem I've run into with this statement is when I've talked to parents about it, the feedback I receive from parents is, oh, I don't care how they do if they did their best. But that's not their best. So what we're telling our gifted students is, I expect A's. Even if we say, whatever you do, I'm not going to be mad, you're okay. Our actions speak very loud with that. If we say, as long as you tried your best, that's okay, we need to make sure that they believe that. Because our gifted students are looking to adults for guidance in situations that are scary. I love this comic because this kid is running and says, Daddy, look how fast I can run. A meteor hits the kid. And this lady says, oh no, you're a kid. And he says, shh, don't react, just smile. The kid comes up and says, Daddy, a meteor hit me. Did you see? And he says, I saw, buddy, very cool. And it says, I'm nearly certain that kids are indestructible if you don't acknowledge their pain. Our students are looking to us in all of these situations when things are scary. Because getting a bad grade is a scary thing. Being told you haven't gotten everything right, especially when you're gifted, when you've been told you're right all of your education. And then suddenly it's not easy. It doesn't come easy. Gifted students look to us. Is this okay? I'm scared. And the ways in which we react really impact them. When I was doing research for this presentation, I found a WikiHow to share your parents, or how to show your parents a bad grade. So this is a prevalent enough issue that there is an entire article about how to talk to your parents about getting a bad grade. And some of the parts are preparing yourself, talking to your parents, dealing with your parents' reactions. It's really scary. And the ways in which we react can tell our students it's okay, or no, you need to be perfect. Even if that's not the message that we're trying to share. And I think it's important that even if we're disappointed or frustrated, we want our students to know that they are safe and their value as a person is not determined by perfection. If your student fails a test, we want to figure out why. And our gut reaction is, oh my gosh. But we want to talk to them. We want them to know, hey, what happened? What can I do to help? And that it's okay. When we talk about modeling, our gifted students are looking to us for reactions, but they're also looking to us as an example for how to act in the world. Right? Even as like teenagers that are like, no, I'm too cool for you. They want to see you set an example because they're looking to see how a human being acts in the world. The ways in which we model behaviors, we need to show them that mistakes and when things don't go according to plan, it is okay. This Calvin and Hobbes strip is probably one of my favorites. Calvin says, Mom, hey mom, and she says, Calvin, stop yelling across the house. If you want to talk to me, walk over to the living room where I am. He walks over and says, I step in dog do, where's the hose? We need our students to know that we make mistakes, that we're not perfect. We need to model that sometimes we need to take breaks from routines and expectations. So when I was in second grade, I told you, I became a little terror. I was like super like keeping time and all of that. To the point where my teacher had to call and say like, this is like causing problems. DJ's getting so anxious about not being on time that it's causing problems. And one of the things that she recommended to my mom, and like, I'm comfortable sharing this, but take me out after bedtime for ice cream. Disassociate a routine with a good thing. That it's okay. We're gonna go do something fun. We need to show our kids that sometimes mistakes happen. Sometimes things don't go according to plan. I know, like I have a 5-year-old, I know how stressful it can be to get out of the house. But we have to show that sometimes things are gonna happen in life. That it's okay. Because they're looking to us. We need to model that even the greatest are not perfect. These are Michael Jordan stats. And if you're somebody that believes LeBron James is the GOAT, like we won't get into that right now, but we'll leave it with Michael. But these are the stats across several games or several seasons. But some things I want to point like across 1,072 games. His field goal percentage was 49.7. We can round that up to 50. Meaning 50% of the shots that he took did not go in. His 3-point shooting, 33%. So 2/3 of the shots he took at 3-point did not go in. His free throws, he is literally standing in the same space every single time, no one interfering, 83.5%. And he is considered the greatest of all time. We need to show our students that it's okay if we're not perfect. I love baseball, like it is my #1 favorite sport. And a good batting average is a 300. Like less than a third of the time you are up to bat, you are hitting the ball and getting on base. Like that's crazy to like think about. But our students don't see it like that. And so we need to empower them and realize, hey, even the greatest make mistakes. When I was teaching, I would do an assignment with my gifted students where I would have them research a hero. So it couldn't be a parent, couldn't be like someone like that they knew, it needed to be someone that they could research. Then I told them in this presentation, I don't want to see a single success that they had. I just want to see their failures. Because I wanted them to see that even their heroes struggled with things. even their heroes fail. A lot of them have a lot of failures. We need to model that it's normal to be vulnerable. So after Chili realizes that she has traumatized her child, we're gonna see how she handles that. What I love about that clip is that Chili admits, I'm not a perfect parent. And that can be a big thing for our gifted students to see. They need to know that it's okay. They need to know that we love them, care about them, that we're not perfect. They need to feel safe. When I was teaching at the DLC, I used to coach track, and I did a very good job of recruiting students from the DLC to participate in track. And I was like, it's awesome. And the way, if you're unfamiliar with the way middle school sports work here in PV, is they follow the festival season, which means half the season, anyone that comes out gets to play, participate, practice with the team, and then after that, they choose their all-star team, which is kind of like your top elite, like your varsity team that goes and plays the other schools. Track is a little different. Basically, anyone that comes out is going to participate in 2 track meets. And I had one of my students, and she was this incredibly brilliant, gifted student. And she came out for track and she was running the 800 meters, which is 2 laps around the track. So they call her event, I'm walking with her, and I see that she is like eyes down on the ground. She's completely like disassociated from what's going on. And I asked her, I'm like, are you okay? What's happening? And this very quiet voice, she says, what if I lose by a lot? So in that moment, she has not only conceded that she is going to lose, but that she is going to lose by a lot. Like, it's not, am I going to lose? It's by how much am I going to lose? Am I going to be embarrassed in front of all of these people? I asked her, I was like, what is your best time? And the students at the track meet, they would wear little stickers that had their best times on there. And she said, I basically told her, that's all I want you to focus on. I don't care about any of the other racers. Just work hard on that. And this is something that I told the students throughout the season. Like, just the beautiful thing about running is that you can do it by yourself. Like, you don't have to worry about anyone else. And yes, races are a thing, but if you just work on your own time, great. So the student ran the 800 meter and she came in last place and she walked off completely dejected. So I asked her though, I was like, how was your time? And she shaved like a minute off of her time. Like, it was crazy, like that sort of growth in a race. Like, a minute is significant. And I exclaimed, I was like, oh my gosh, you shaved a minute off your time. And I was so happy. This high school track student from Horizon was walking by and she heard that. She pinned on that. She like turned, she's like, you shaved a minute off your time. And she just celebrated the student. As we're leaving the meet, that student is going home, but she runs up to me and she just says thank you and runs back to her car. In that moment, she just needed to know that I was proud of her, regardless of what happened. She needed to know that she was safe, that I wasn't sitting there judging her. Like, she was already doing that. Our gifted students, they don't need you to be perfect. They just need you to know, or they just need to know that you care about them. That their value is not related to how they do on a test or how they do on a sport. Just need to know that you care and that they're safe and that you're proud of them. Those things can go a really long way in making a difference. And they might not share that with you, like, immediately. But it makes them feel comfortable. In the session that I did this morning, I had a teacher that asked, like, what would you have done if, like, she did not beat her time? I would have told her I was proud of her. She got out there and ran in front of a bunch of people. And that wasn't something that she was like passionate about. It's not like she was like, track is my life and getting it tattooed on my arm. Like, She was just doing it because I said it's fun. But even if she hadn't. I wasn't proud of her. And if she would have kept going about being upset. We would have talked about ways to improve. That's not what she needed in that moment. She just needed to know that there was an adult that cared about her and that her value wasn't connected to. She in a race. I think it's really important. You don't have to be perfect. You're gonna make mistakes. You're going to have a reaction to something. But it means a lot when you tell your gifted perfectionist, you know what? My reaction wasn't okay. Let's talk about this. And give them that opportunity to talk. Because they're looking to you for guidance. And you can help in a profound way. Are there any questions about gifted perfectionism or any thoughts or any questions?
Really a question or something. But I really struggle with perfectionism myself, and then when I see them with kids, I'm like, oh, it's so frustrating because I don't mean to be modeling it for them. I mean, certainly I feel like a lot of times I'm more like chilly when I talk to them,
Yeah,
but I'm modeling perfectionism in my own self, so they're seeing me be super hard on myself, and I feel like in that way, I guess, I don't know how to. I don't really know what the question is there, but like, it's just something that I notice is like. They're seeing me in that situation and such as you would. Having more grace with myself, but.
Yeah. Well, and I think that's like a big thing of even just acknowledging that, and even if it's after the fact. Having that moment of clarity and just saying like, man, like, I realized like. Dinner didn't turn out the way that I planned on it or whatever, those discussions go a long way. Especially as kids get older, like those discussions can be really meaningful in seeing that vulnerability, so I think just having that awareness is super, super valuable, and my daughter's 5. And I have those discussions where I'm like, I got frustrated. This is why, and this is what I'm gonna do to work on it, and all of that, and. Again, it makes a big difference just having those moments of talking through that with your kiddos and just letting them know and having that awareness of your own perfectionism. If they're experiencing that, they can see it in you and that it's okay. So I think that's a really beautiful thing to have those discussions and understanding yourself.
What are your thoughts about even using the language perfect with our kids? We've sort of tried to eliminate it, or perfectionist, and just even having that as a bar to hold anything against or yourself against, just, I just think, oh my gosh, I don't want to do that to my kids, I don't want them to turn out this way. So what is your thought on even using that? I mean, it was in the Bluey thing, well, this is perfect, and they put it up on the, but it doesn't have to be perfect to get a spot on the refrigerator, so just curious.
You know, I think the ways in which language holds power, like I'm an English teacher, so like I really believe that. You know, if you can avoid saying that something's perfect, I think there's a lot of power in not using that term in reference, especially when we're talking about things that we do and whatnot. If you use perfect, I don't think it's a bad thing, but I think if you can find other terms to describe like that was great, or this is what you did, and you're focusing on specific aspects.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot more value in that. Yeah.
Do want to, oh, go ahead. No.
Well, I'm not sure I'll be able to articulate this all that well, but I'll try. How much of the perfectionism from gifted kids or in gifted kids comes from the fact that from an early age, they've been grouped separately, they've been told they're the gifted ones, they're in maybe a cluster model or a comprehensive program, so they feel like they have to like hold up to a standard versus their brains are telling them they should be good at something.
I don't think programming has a real impact on that. In fact, like a lot of the research addresses the fact that gifted programs allow students to be with peers that think and push each other and that sort of thing, and you realize that you're not always going to be the best at those things, and being in that setting can be really valuable.
Okay.
Where I think that the internal perception can come from is when you don't experience struggle. So it's like when we think about going through school, if every single thing you've done is the right thing and you've gotten 100 on every single thing, you start developing this thought that school is easy, school is not practice. The number of kids I've had in middle and high school that have told me I've never had to study for a test, or teachers will, like, I've had students who are like, teachers will brag, you can't do this in one night, and I take that on as a challenge. And it's like, great, like you got the 100% on that, but that's not always gonna be the case. So I don't think it's so much the programming, I think it's more so the fact that if students don't experience challenge or aren't given those glows and grows, even if they got 100%, it can start developing that perspective of the end grade is all that matters. I'm not looking at the feedback.
But we do want to thank you so much for coming this evening and for sharing everything, and I personally like it. So, thank you so much. I'm Melissa Schwartz, I'm the gifted co-chair. Superior, but one of the things we'd like to remind you is that these parent presentations are a collaboration between the gifted department and your United Parent Council. Just out of curiosity, because I haven't been coming up because I've been doing this single-handedly for the last few, how many of you know what United Parent Council is in this room? Oh, that's better than I thought. Okay, that's awesome. Well, really important for you to know, we have our UPC meeting on the 19th. We're actually talking about the presentation after the meeting will be helping our youth navigate healthy relationships. Very much in line with this, taking it to the level of how do they have relationships with others. And that can certainly be a challenge, especially for a perfectionist, on how to understand how to relate to somebody else and those expectations. So I hope you'll be able to join us for that. That'll be about 10 in the morning. We do record those. And then also want you to know that the special ed group with United Parent Council also has an evening presentation on February 25th in the DAC East and West on planning for the future, guardianship, special needs trust, SSI, and ABLE accounts. Some very important tools for your use if that's something of interest to you. Make sure you're aware of that because that one I do not believe is recorded. They are not allowed to record that because the presenters that do that event. So if you want to do that, please come and attend that in person. You can find all of these at pbupc.org. The other thing, two things for you to know is beginning next Wednesday, we are going to put out a survey. We are going to ask the gifted department to send it out as well, but we'd like your feedback and those of other parents to give us information about what you'd like to see next year. What are programming areas that you've not seen maybe and you would like some more information. And also we'd like to start up again our meetings for lunch and have parent gatherings so you can come and talk to other people if you have some questions, parent to parent. So hopefully you'll join us for those. And it's great to see DJ here. I'm a parent that had the awesome opportunity to have my child be his student back at the DLC. So nice to see you.
So DJ, thank you very much. We greatly appreciate you and we do hope you plan. Of course.